I'm here in Lommel, Belgium, at the ZF Wind Power Plant, the largest gearbox manufacturing facility here in Europe. And I'm with me, Hans Ackermans, Chief Customers Officer at ZF Wind Power. Welcome, Hans. Hans,
thank you.
Tell us, what is a gearbox?
A gearbox is deceivingly simple, I would say. It's basically the opposite of what you know from a car. There it does the opposite. So it's a gearbox that stands in between the generator in the turbine and the rotor to make sure that the slow turning speed turns into high speed so the generator can efficiently create the electricity which we all need in our homes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're explaining it very simple, and I bet it's not that simple. There's probably a lot of high tech behind such a gearbox.
The complexities, of course, there's a number of elements. One is it runs 24/7, basically. It's designed for 20-25 years. So it's up there, tens of meters above ground, up there. And it's exposed to a lot of dynamic forces. So it's not just slowly turning, there's a lot of dynamic forces. There's huge blades these days on the turbines, and those put massive forces on the gearbox. It has to make sure that it has to cope with a lot of forces. And if you look at these days, it's quite some weight, 40 to even 200 tons, so it's a lot of weight. But if you look at how much torque in the end, how much power goes through the gearbox, it's quite a state of the art that is needed on a lot of elements in terms of material, in terms of design, in terms of tolerances, in terms of manufacturing. So it is, in the end, it looks simple, it looks like a commodity product, but in the end there's a lot of innovation that goes in there, which we've been developing over the last 40 years.
Yeah. And you mentioned those newer models that weigh up to 200 tons. I think we're standing in front of two of those items here. And of course, making these things is one thing, but how do you ensure that the product is reliable and trustworthy? You have a new way of doing this.
Correct. So at ZF Wind Power, we see reliability and quality and innovation. This is our drivers. Of course, we need to be competitive, but we believe that we can be competitive through this innovation and this technology. As you see indeed behind us, this is an offshore powertrain. It's now going up to 220 to 250 tons for one powertrain. That's of course offshore, 50 megawatt, but also onshore. We're supplying gearboxes out of our facility here, but also globally out of our facilities in India and in China. And for us, reliability, technology, innovation is key in terms of being successful. And for that, we've also now installed and developed a new 30 megawatt test rig. The goal of that test rig is to make sure that before we go into series, when we start supplying a lot of these things, that we do a test, highly accelerated lifetime test, as we call it, to basically try on a relatively short period of time, 6-9 months, depending, even sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, depending on the product, to make sure that we can acceleratedly test and validate a product before we go into series. So it's basically making sure that the product, the intentions that we've used to design it, that it somehow works the way that it's supposed to work, and we test it and we expose it to a lot of forces and a lot of overloads to make sure that we can check, is it working properly, and we can check that off, and then we can go into series.
You mentioned the test rig is 30 megawatts. So if we're making 15 megawatt powertrains here today, why do we have a test bench of 30 megawatts? What's the reasoning behind that?
It's a significant investment. I don't know the exact number, but I believe it's between 50 and 60 million euros of investment in a test rig. So this is not something you do for tomorrow. This is something you do for the next decade. I compare it often with the previous validation test rig. So again, this is a test rig which is meant for validating prototypes, so not to test serial products. Our previous validation test rig for testing prototypes was 13.2 megawatts. And this 13.2 megawatts was installed at the time when we were supplying in series 2 and 3 megawatts. So actually that test rig was also significantly overrated. And if you now see how the market has evolved, this 13.2 megawatt became way too small for validating. And we've now actually transformed that validation test rig from a 13.2 megawatt from a prototype test rig into a serial test rig. And therefore, while we've invested into the new test rig of 30 megawatts. So it's basically being ready for what we believe will become the next generation of offshore, to be ready when we make these huge investments, that we also say that the next gearboxes, the next powertrains, we're also capable of being able to test and validate those ones.
This test bench is a way of future-proofing the site and the company as a whole, of course, for the next generation of wind turbines. What are the strengths of the facility here in Lommel, of the manufacturing capacity here in Europe to bring in those test benches and ultimately the production of those components.
Yeah. I think the good thing about the facility here is it's the headquarters still. It's our global headquarters here, which we have in Europe, in Belgium. It's a traditionally Belgian company, as it's now ZF Wind Power, but it was originally it was called Hanson Transmissions before ZF Group bought it. So there's a lot of know-how here. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of core know-how that originated from here. We also have a lot of R&D capabilities in our other facilities, but the core is still here in Belgium. 40 years of innovation and technology have been building here. And therefore, it also made sense for us to make this huge investment here because of the history, but also because we have the facility here, we have the production here. So we're basically having the luxury of having, on the one hand, the manufacturing, and on the other hand, having the knowledge combined. And there's also a good location in terms of being close to universities, to other centers of excellence in terms of collaborating with a lot of universities in Belgium, but also just across the border in the Netherlands, in Germany. So I think that's a good site here to make that significant investment.
Yeah. So really the innovation, the R&D heartland is still here in the Lommel facility.
Correct. It's still in Lommel. As I said, we've built up quite some capabilities as well in China and in India. But I think this huge 40 years of experience that we've built here, the core know-how, I think is still here, and that we're leveraging by building the new prototype and test center here.
How many units are you producing here in a given year?
Always difficult in terms of units, because if we would make here, let's call it a 4 or a 6 or a 7 megawatt onshore, and we 1 unit, and we make 1 unit on a 15 megawatt. Of course, in terms of capacity utilization, that's significantly different. I believe we have 7,500 megawatts of European production capacity. Unfortunately, it's not completely filled, but just to give you an indication, we as I think an industry in Europe, we specifically at ZF Wind Power, we are ready to take the next step and to make sure that when the demand comes, we are ready to supply locally if needed here out of Europe. So for us, it's all about making sure that now the demand comes and that we somehow, within Europe, all the member states, we start acting upon our promises. And then we will be ready to supply with our capacity, which we have, and potentially even further expand if needed. But right now we are at 7.5 gigawatts, 7,500 megawatt of production capacity.
So you mentioned you can expand, you can still make more here in Lommel. So what do the governments need to do?
I'm in a commercial role, so for me it all is about volume. I think if we see there's a lot of uncertainty in our market, we just talked about a 50-60 million euro investments on our 30 megawatt test rig. That's huge. For us, the most important topic is making sure that the demand comes the way that we planned, instead of talking about targets, trying to really implement that, because we're way behind, I think, when it comes to the targets. So I think it's all about making sure that we get this demand going to make sure that we can get the costs under control, get the cost down, and with this volume, I'm sure we can be competitive as Europe in Europe in terms of the wind industry.
Very good. So market visibility plus innovation capital, R&D know-how leads to a competitive and healthy European supply chain.
That's what we are convinced about. Absolutely.
Very good. Many thanks, Hans, for hosting us here.